my husband and I got married in August of '79 and moved to Texas, farther away from Grandpa and Grandma. Didn't realize that that would have a bad effect on our son. A few years later, when he was 7 years old, we had another son, Zach, and it was really a hard thing for him after being the only child for so long. And he was real jealous, I'm sure. And that's really when the problems began. It continued with my being impatient and not having the coping skills and yet not looking for help, because I thought that if I went to Parents Anonymous, that meant I was a bad person. And so I wasn't looking for help, and things just didn't get better. They got worse. And when we moved to Tyler, he got involved with a boy in the neighborhood who was smoking and inhaling gasoline, and things just went from bad to worse.
When Scott was 15, like I say, they recommended he go to a long-term treatment center in Minnesota. And I only knew a couple of people in Minnesota. When I called my friend Wally up there in Minnesota, I said, I'm going to be up in Minneapolis area for several days, and I'd like to see you while I'm there. And he said, oh, well, really, why? And I said, well, I'm putting my son in a long-term treatment center up there. He said, which one? And I said, Golden Valley Health Center. He says, oh, I know where that is. I said, really? Well, can you tell me where there's a good hotel near there? And he said, well, I hate to break the news to you, there's no good hotels there. They're all about 25 miles away. And my friend Wally says, wait a minute. He said, what time is your flight? And I said, it's Friday night at 9 o'clock. He said, okay, we're going to pick you up. You're going to come and you're going to live with us. See, his house was less than a mile from the hospital. And for 3 days, he and his wife and children took care of me when I was not capable of taking care of myself. And they made sure I got to my appointments there at the hospital, and I got to visit with Scott. And that was the beginning of the healing that went on in my life. I learned how to talk with my son when he was away in treatment in Minnesota. He had control of the conversation. Up until that time, I had always treated him more like property than as a child. And I regret that, even to this day. But I did try to make some amends to my son, and I learned that I can't change him, and the best thing I could do sometimes was to leave him alone.
At that time, my husband and I got involved in some parent support group meetings, and that was the first glimmer of hope. Because up until that point, I had thought that I was totally responsible for everything that had gone wrong with him, and that I should be able to help him, and I just didn't seem to be able to. I just felt so helpless. And in the parent support group, we found out that we weren't the only ones that were having problems like that, and just, it was such a help to just know that we weren't the only ones.
He called me out of the blue and said, Dad, I'd like to go fishing with you. And I was stunned, because approximately a year prior, he had cut me out of his life. And I had only seen him twice in the interim, and very briefly both times. My son and I had a good day fishing. It was actually a Sunday when he called. And we had a really good time. He gave me a hug standing there by the side of the highway. And he also gave his mom a hug that day. And it was a good day. It was a beautiful day. When we got the word that my son had committed suicide, it was my daughter-in-law that called me. And she said, can you come? And I said, yes, we will be there. And I immediately loaded up, and I went to see what was there, and the EMS and the fire department was there, and they were basically waiting on the judge to get there to pronounce. They didn't tell me that at the time, but that's what they were waiting for. And you guys surrounded me. The pastor was there, some friends of mine were there, and I was comforted, but I was also able to comfort my daughter-in-law. And the most amazing thing happened. We had a funeral, and the house was overflowing with people. And the minister that preached, his name, Walt Blanche, he has a little ministry here in Tyler called the Beehive Ministry. At one time in Scott's history, he had lived with Mr. Blanche for about 1.5 years. And it was really kind of neat when he lived with Walt because he did make a profession of faith.
It was so helpful to be reminded by Walt that one day when Walt was giving him a ride home from work, he had told Walt that he had accepted Christ.
And when Walt got up at the podium at that funeral, it was the most amazing words I've ever heard spoken by a preacher. And he said, "The God I know is bigger than suicide. The shepherd finds the lost sheep, the ones who cannot find their way home."
We miss him so much. And I'm so glad I can look forward to seeing him again. I'm so thankful that I can look forward to seeing him again.
I know where my son is. I have an absolute surety as to where he is today. He's with the one. He's with Jesus right now. And he is at peace.